Hello and welcome back to the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum, Priorities, Predictions, and Concerns. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit the virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Stacy Snyder, Senior Vice President, Finance and Accounting, Executive Search with Addison Group. We're excited to have Stacy and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Talent Acquisition and Retention, Strengthen Finance by Investing in Employees. Stacy, thank you so much for being our moderator today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. As he mentioned, my name is Stacy Snyder. I am an executive search recruiter with Addison Group. I actually have my degree in accounting from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. Went on to be an accountant for about 5 years and then transitioned over to executive recruiting roughly 13 years ago. And that's been my primary wheelhouse has been accounting and finance searches. I live in Austin, Texas, and I oversee our executive search practices in Austin, San Antonio, Texas, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Georgia, as well as Phoenix, Arizona. So thank you so much all for joining, and I'd like to welcome you to our moderators, to our panelists. Let's start with Valkhil Correa.
Hello. So I'm the Vice President of Finance at Baha Mar, a gorgeous resort in the Bahamas. Being there for a while now, almost 5 years, and I'm in charge of the digital transformation for the entire resort. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Next up, John Hugo.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. And I went to Valkhir's Baha Mar website before this panel, and you should check it out. It's amazing. It looks beautiful. I'm a longtime accountant, CPA, 5 years in audit, 10 years in cable and telecom, and then spent about 12 years at Lifetime Fitness based in Minneapolis. Took Lifetime public, but while we were at Lifetime, I became an early adopter of Workday. And Workday is a finance HCM payroll analytics planning tool with real-time information. I came over to Workday about 7 years ago, and I work with CFOs, controllers, finance teams, really looking at Workday from a former customer's point of view. And happy to be here and look forward to the panel.
Thank you, John. Next up, we've got Derek Walker.
Good morning, or good afternoon now. I'm Derek Walker. Again, my career has been somewhat of a path of twists and turns, but happy to be a part of the panel. Began my career within professional athletics. Following athletics, I spent time in the military, and then I became somewhat of a career changer and went into the accounting and finance function. So spent time with Nationwide Insurance in a finance leadership rotation program. Following that, I supported their sales distribution from a finance standpoint. My most recent employer was Nike Inc. I was within their technology finance team, so supporting the technology function from a finance standpoint. So it's really a great opportunity to be on this panel because I'm really passionate about the subject of talent retention and talent development because I've been a product of many folks who have poured into me and developed me. So I'm hoping to share my insights and hopefully something that will be beneficial for the audience. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that we can all agree post-COVID, talent acquisition and retention within finance and accounting is probably one of the most things that keeps managers up at night. So I'm excited to get this started. So we'll kick off with our first question. Within your respective organizations, are you currently focused on talent retention? If so, can you please share and elaborate some best practices that you're using? And, John, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Sure, Stacy. That's a great question. That's kind of the theme of this whole conversation. So Workday was founded in 2005, and 6 core values that were established way back in 2005. And the very first one is employees. So the other 5, customer service, innovation, integrity, my favorite, fun, and profitability. But honestly, without retaining the best employees and having that as your first core value, I don't think the other 5 can be met. About 2 years ago, Workday acquired a company called Peakon, and I might refer to this a few times during the conversation, so I'm going to spell it Peakon. It was a Danish company, but what it does, it's really a talent evaluation tool that collects information real time. So every Friday, every employee at Workday, which is pushing 15, 20,000 employees, gets 5 questions from Peakon delivered through Slack, another technology tool. Anyway, so those 5 questions, over time, artificial intelligence or machine learning starts to tailor those to you as an individual. So this is real-time information that managers are now getting and can help develop that talent. So, but it runs across a broad spectrum. It's not just, do you like your pay or some of those simple old ones, but it's taking real-time information, and what it does is it's kind of predicting you as, flight risk, or it's looking at you areas for growth and opportunity. But it's all confidential other than your individual manager. But then you start to take that information, we call it the employee intelligent voice, and you start collaborating with your manager on a more regular basis. I mean, when I was in auditing 25 years ago, it was once a year you'd fill out a 5-page form on paper and have a conversation with your manager. This is so different, and I'm still amazed by how it works. But the other thing is, I think a lot of people, when they hear, well, every Friday you get a survey, and you start to wonder if there's value in that. But like I mentioned, the machine learning over time tailors those to your strengths and weaknesses. So it actually gets real-time information that makes a difference in how you evaluate that talent. So Peakon's an amazing tool, and like I said, I'll probably refer to it a couple more times this afternoon. But that's one thing that we're doing and using often.
It's interesting, for example, in the Bahamas, in the resort that I work there, we have 4,000 employees there. So this exactly what you were saying. The HR there decided to put these tablets around the resort and get real-time feedback, because it seems that this is what you need to do to get a sense of what the employees are feeling at that moment, so we can address immediately and not wait for the 6-month evaluation or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And to add to what both of you said, I think that's something that kind of jumped out to me most recently during my time at Nike, is the investments in the exploration. I think we can all acknowledge that we're in a time of uncertainty where in some instances, employees are trying to figure out what they need and trying to understand their environments and their work situations post-COVID. And one of the things that I noticed was an increased emphasis on the exploration, more surveys, trying to understand what employees want, but also spending time trying to help them understand how to fill those gaps. And I think you alluded to it, John, and where there was a time where you can come in and you put a piece of paper on your manager's desk. Now the environment is so fluid, it's so different, and it's so dynamic. We have this massive opportunity to create and kind of curate our own experiences. So we really, or what I observe, is just an interest in an employee taking a greater role in shaping the experiences and using those explorations and using those data to help create that.
Yeah, it really becomes a continuous loop, not a one and done type of deal. You're sensing, you're getting input from employees, then you're aggregating that information into insights, and then you take action. But it doesn't end with action. It starts over. So the real-time aspect of it is so unique too. But it works and employees appreciate it. And I think that's a whole part of the retention.
And then you don't need to have like a big company to implement those technologies, right? Sometimes you just need to talk to your employees. If you have a small company with, a few employees, talk to them, right?
Yeah.
This is the best way to get, feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As someone that talks with accounting and finance professionals on a daily basis, I can tell you that we're seeing more candidates take offers, not necessarily based solely on pay, but based on, do they feel like they've got a career path that's been laid out for them, and do they feel like they can communicate in a positive way with who they are going to be reporting to? So those are two things that we're constantly seeing right now, almost beat out compensation, so two very, very important things for sure. We're going to go to our next question, which is, in what ways are you strengthening the finance function by investing in talent, and what are the critical roles you are looking to improve? And Derek, I believe that you're going to lead us on this one.
Yeah. And I'll speak, both from an individual perspective and also from, my experiences. I think it kind of leads into the previous question, right? It's the exploration piece, right? I think that where is the investment going, or what are the individual roles? What I observed and participated in some of the committees and culture committees that I was a part of is that employees want, to your point, Stacey, the cross-functional experience. How can I, within my finance seat, broaden the net of exposure that I can gain? How can I find opportunities to partner across the business? So, and specifically when we think about a role, there wasn't one particular role that would meet all the needs of the employees. And it was, the emphasis was on, or I guess it was on the organization to allow the folks to work cross-functionally. That was one of the top things that was of interest. How can we create roles that allow people to work more cross-functionally? How can we create opportunities for individuals to stretch into other areas of the business? And how can those opportunities be created? I think that was one of the things that was of the utmost importance. But again, I would highlight from in terms of the roles that are becoming of importance, the business partnership aspect. So focusing on things that allow for business partnership was a primary concern. And I think that really characterized a lot of what I was seeing in terms of the particular roles or the particular opportunities that were being invested in.
Yeah, in my previous employer, and this was enabled by my current employer, but it really shifted on traditional roles in finance and how they operated. Two examples, we had a functional area like accounts payable. The whole procure to pay process was pretty manual. We bring in a new system and it becomes much more automated in real time. So what happened is we had a couple accounts payable, almost clerical type employees that were now given an opportunity on the technology side to help. You become take a functional expert, and now they become a technical expert, because they can help drive those business processes in that whole cycle. So that was really neat to see. And one of those employees at Lifetime now speaks at sessions on Rising, our customer conference, and talks about automating that whole process. So it's neat to see that functional expertise turn to technical expertise. The other one is related to that, and it's taking traditional accounting roles that used to spend the whole month closing the books and doing journal entries and everything. And when more of that becomes automated, what happens is those former accountants now are being looked at as more of an analyst type role. So there's another shift that I've seen a lot of, that investing in that talent and having those individuals that are already strong in one area become strong in another area, it makes their career stronger as well.
And then one tip for the audience, right? You that are in the finance world, and then you have your department, a traditional department, I highly recommend you to hire someone with, programming skills. This is it's becoming like a new thing right now, where we can bring this talent to your finance team, Maybe you already have some income auditor or an auditor in your company that likes programming. Develop that person because they can really make an impact in your accounting, right? Process, in your finance, automating what John was saying, right? The more automated you are, the more strong becomes your associates, and then that bring meaning, sense of purpose, and things like that.
Right. And I would just add to it by saying, the thing being individuals who are able to maintain that type of growth mindset, right? As we indirectly invest in talent by automating processes or automating roles that were previously very manual, it puts the impetus on the employee to be able to develop those new skills. To your point, Valkyr, it's to be able to code or be able to lean into some other aspect of the role that becomes critically important by virtue of something that may have been minimized or eliminated. And that's what I was getting at when I'm saying, hey, looking left, looking right, and seeing other opportunities to create the path, to create the role that you particularly want as a result of some of the investments and some of the changes that may be taking place.
And it's interesting because right now, right, all these research are coming up right now to try to figure out what is happening with the Great Resignation, right? There's a question here about the quiet quitters. How can you identify them? So again, it's very important for you, right, to understand what is happening in the market. So the research is showing that the people are leaving the companies because they don't have development and they don't have the sense of advancement, which means that you need to be really careful and then really mindful about what you're doing in your company. It's not about just the bottom line anymore. I love what John was saying, that he has one of his pillars is the people. And then people, our companies need to start to understand that. We need to start to promote, right, development and then this sense of advancement, right, like a career path. Mm-hmm. It's what happened when we started, right? And then we stick to that company because we believe in that that there was a possibility for us to grow. And people right now are leaving their companies because they don't feel that they have an opportunity there.
Right.
So we do have a question in the chat, and that is, so what do you do when you have a great staff, but you know that you don't have mobility within finance? So what are the leaders supposed to do in those situations?
So for example, what I always do with my team is to bring the mentality of the knowledge, right? You bring your knowledge here, right? And then you establish a time, right, for you to get the knowledge, right? So they're gonna learn. So two things will happen eventually. The first one will be promoted. The second one, that person will leave your company for a better position somewhere else, but he will leave a good trace, a trace of goodwill in your company, right? If you don't have the space for people to grow, you cannot hold them back.
Mm-hmm.
You need to. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Valkyr.
No, you just need to keep constantly train them. This is there is no end to the training, right? You leave a good trace, and the other one comes and follow that path.
Yeah, and I also that's a great point, and I also think that never before have we seen the blending of functions as well, whether it's HR, finance, operations, in creating opportunities. I mean, even Derek's experience, it sounds like he's gone across some functional areas. But when you have, this is the buzzword we use too much, but democratization of data, all that information is available to almost everybody now. A financial expert may have an opportunity in operations or vice versa. So I think that happens a lot now, and we're going to see a lot more of it.
And I think to add to that is, I think it's a change in the leadership model. I think the environment is forcing leaders' hands in how they manage talent. And it's not just in terms of title, as you said, as data becomes available, as an interest in developing new skills becomes important, leaders have to be willing to find new ways to get those experiences to those employees that may not have been traditionally available. And then I think it involves a transformation in the leadership model. And that would be my tip to leaders is, think about how the work is currently organized and how it can be redistributed based on interest, based on particular passions. But also sometimes that challenges us as leaders because we may necessarily have to let go of a particular body of work and allow someone else to take a larger role in order to support the development and in order to make sure that they're fulfilled, and not looking at it just in terms of a title. And I think that's becoming particularly important. It's just a change in our leadership model and how we traditionally sometimes think about our organizations. Hey, I'm in this position, therefore I must do this. Well, is it a time that we can question whether or not you're the only person that can do that job? And if you are, is now the time to begin training someone for the future of that particular function? And will that be critical in terms of retention?
Absolutely. So how are you guys, I guess, finding and attracting diverse quality candidates for various roles? So, and if you can elaborate on any, hiring trends that you guys are using or anything, that would be greatly appreciated. But I believe, Derek, you're kicking us off on that one.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important topic right now. I think diversity, equity, inclusion is at the forefront of our conversations. And I think it's very difficult to separate the conversation from retention and attraction of talent. But I think there's two ways of thinking about it. Companies should, for great reason, for critical business reasons, maintain an emphasis on attracting diverse candidates from underrepresented groups. But I think more importantly, with a caution around mission, vision, values, right? If we become too focused on the candidate profile to the detriment of the alignment of the company values and the cultural experience that the candidate would get, do we inadvertently impact the ability to retain the candidate? Said differently, if a candidate is not joining the organization for the correct reasons, if there isn't this enduring sense of connection to the mission, vision, someone else will just come along with a more attractive remote opportunity and pull that candidate away in a matter of months, right? And I think that's become more apparent in this environment. So it involves a deeper connection throughout the hiring process, getting more in line in terms of, hey, what makes this person tick? So, and I think that's just as important in this diverse candidate pool. And I think the temptation sometimes can be to deviate sometimes away from that when we think about remote, when we think about some of the other things that can attract diverse candidates. We also have to maintain an emphasis on that. From my experience in my most recent company, I think the employee resource groups are a very meaningful way of attracting diverse candidate pools and engaging them and creating programming that allows them to align with the culture, understand the culture once they arrive. I think that's one way that I observe the organization really doubling down in this area. Connections with different entities within our environment, be it if it's a particular universities, if you think about historically Black colleges and universities, deepening the connections, deepening the relationships with them in an effort to create a pipeline of the candidate pools. If we're thinking about women, deepening our connection with organizations that support the development of women in an effort to create those pipelines, because I think those pipelines create a deeper connection to the organization. That gives a better chance to retain the candidates once we're able to attract them. Because I definitely think it's twofold. We want to attract them, but we want to attract them for the right reasons so that we can increase our chances of retaining.
Yeah, that's awesome, Derek. We like to think that we want to create a situation where a candidate says, this is where I truly want to work. And that really starts with building over time, and some companies can do this right out of the gate, but building over time that culture, that perceived culture of this is a great company. They're on the top 25 lists, but part of that culture, it's the new corporate currency, I think, is culture. It's the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, the well-being piece, whether that's health or mental. The whole employee experience, but all of that together creates this culture where employees, young employees, old employees, everybody wants to work. You mentioned the employee resource group. We have we call them employee belonging councils, and they're everything from Blacks at Workday, Jewish at Workday, people with disabilities, Pride, every diversity group that you can think of, even older employees and veterans. There's all of these councils where you can belong and feel like you're part of the group, and all of those work together. So for me and my company, it's that perceived culture, even from the outside world, that makes it a great place to work, and the diversity and inclusion is a huge part of that.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to our next question, and that is, how are you using cross-team collaboration and working with HR, with the HR function to improve employee retention strategies? And Valkyr, I believe that you're going to lead us up on that one.
So the first thing that I highly recommend other companies to do is to look to your own company and identify if you have your basic needs for the employees covered. Because you cannot start to talk about retention if your salary is not leveled, right? Is not competitive. If your package of benefits is not there. So first thing first, clean the house, make sure that you have your basic needs covered. Because whatever you do to try to retain employees that are not happy with their current situation compared to the competitive set, it's going to be impossible. So fix that first, and then start to work with your training, right? So again, the lack of development and the sense of advancement, it's making people leave your company. That's the main reason why people left their company this year. Recent research are showing that. So what can you do, right? So again, you need to make your team members highly in knowledge, right? Then one of the things that I did in my past experiences, it's always look to that position and train them in the immediate position that comes before and the one that comes after. Start there, start little. Start, little by little. There's a question here about, these employees that's already there for a long time. They don't like to change, but start to train them in what comes before and what is after. So they start to gain knowledge about, the whole picture of what happened in the company. And also we need to start to share meaningful information. So the most valuable thing that you can offer to somebody else, it's your time, right? We don't have control on it, right? So you need to make sure that you understand that. The most valuable thing that you can offer to someone, it's your time. So you need to really use that wisely. You need to listen to your employees, right? You need to make their knowledge really, really high, right? And then you start to add those things together, and then that for sure will help in the process of retaining them. But remember, the market is talking to us, right? All these employees are talking to us through this research. They are not finding opportunities to develop themselves inside of your own company. So look to it and make sure you address it, right?
Yeah, it's those are great points, Valkyr. It's funny, so a CFO years back would look at a P&L income statement. Usually the top number, the largest number on the operating expense side was compensation or payroll. And they'd look at that as dollars, but you just defined it as time, people's efforts. And I think now with the collaboration with HR and the importance of our topic here on retention, I think CFOs are taking a lot harder look at payroll, not just as a dollar, but as truly the number one asset on his team, his or her team. So, one of the chat questions earlier, we talked about this, but creating opportunities between different divisions and different functions, that's going to create these opportunities. And you couldn't have that without cross collaboration and people using similar tools.
And I would just add to what both Valkyr and John have said is, from an employee standpoint, being cautious that we don't get too indoctrinated into this top-down perspective, and that our organizations understand that the employee has to take on some of the initiative and making sure that we're appropriately rewarding those employees that do show initiative within the organization. Because I think the prevailing thought process sometimes can be, I have to wait for my superior to give me permission to explore in this other area of the business, when in fact, some of the cross collaboration and some of the expansion of opportunity can happen just by the employee expanding their network or being able to think differently about the experiences that they want to gain. And when that does start to take place, the organization recognizing and rewarding that. I think that's a critical component too as well, because I don't think that all the leadership has to bear all the responsibility. I think it's definitely, like you talked about earlier, John, it's a loop, right? It's a constant feedback loop where there has to be this working relationship between employees and managers in order to create the experience that we want, as opposed to waiting for it to be given to us in the way that we want.
Yeah.
I think a common thing keeps coming is that, you know, accounting and finance naturally are not, I would say, risk takers, right? We like black and white, we like the numbers, the debits and the credits of those things. But the reality is that we're in an environment and economy where black and white necessarily it doesn't work for us anymore, and we have to think outside of the box and you know, look outside of, okay, well, we used to do this, and we've always done this, and look at what can we do now to attract those top talent. You know, looking outside of what we've done before, getting creative. You know, someone mentioned it, that expanding cross-functionally, allowing accounting and finance individuals to touch the operational piece of the business. I mean, they see the entire P&L, so they're aware of what's going on in the business, and just allowing more opportunities and just more area for color and gray than historically we had in the past.
Can I add on the risk part there real quick?
Yeah.
So this is kind of funny, but for public companies, you know, in their 10K filings, they have all the risk factors listed. And traditionally, the only piece that was really about employees was key executives.
Mhm.
And now in risk factor sections of public documents, you're seeing more about employee churn and retention, not just the executive team, yes, but now everybody, your whole organization. You know, talent risk is a business risk. So losing those key employees, everything we've been talking about so far now is becoming a risk factor in public companies and private companies as well. But you see it right there in the filings. I thought that was pretty interesting, that trend.
Yeah, losing top talent is, I would say, one of the biggest risks, probably. You know, it's not number one, but it is a very big risk that not only the manager, but leadership within the organization has to deal with, because it's not just about losing that knowledge, but it's also the cost of replacing that knowledge in the current environment that we're in. You know, the time spent interviewing, but then also the cost to replace that person now is probably a lot higher than maybe where they had that person previously.
Yeah.
And Stacey, I would just add, you know, when you think about hiring top talent or developing top talent, it's taking risk, or I guess the idea of risk taking is, from an accounting finance standpoint, having to take risk on different candidate profiles. And I think this goes back to the third question when we talk about diversity within functions, is having to take risk on different candidate profiles. Most of you who have been in accounting and finance, there's a traditional pathway. There's a traditional set of skills that are typically thought of as being your finance and accounting skill set. And I don't want to underemphasize the importance of those, because I think those are very important, but I think the pathway by which they are gained. Is it a time where we hire for a different set of skills and have confidence in our ability to train up those others, as opposed to the alternative, hiring in those skills, the specific traditional skills, in hopes of training maybe the soft skill component? And I think this is a time to take that type of risk. But as you alluded to, just in finance, high risk, high reward. And it's being able to find calculated spaces to take risk on different candidate profiles that traditionally may not have been selected, in hopes of training and developing them. But as Valkyr and John both talked about, now there's this deeper sense of fulfillment. Now there's this really deep connection to the organization that may lead right into the retention piece that we're talking about as well.
Absolutely. So we talked about training, a lot of training and upscaling. So I'm gonna skip to our final question so we can answer some questions in the chat because they're good. But how are you addressing employee burnout and boosting morale while managing a distributed workforce? And I know Valkyr, I believe that you're gonna kick us off with this one.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mention an economist here. His name is Vilfredo Pareto, right? And then he has this principle of the 80-20, right? 80% of your problems or opportunities comes from 20% of source. Very interesting, because sometimes we spend so much time and energy, right? Thinking about all these problems. And then if you understand that there is only 20% root cause, that changed the whole picture. The giant is not that giant anymore, and then you can address it. Of course, you need to investigate and try to research exactly what those 20% is. But it's being proven. If you think about all your problems, right, in your company, you see the root cause, it's really small. That's creating the whole, problem. We used to have, I used to work for a Spanish chain of hotels. And then, it was always that one or two hotels giving you the most headaches. You go there and fix that. And of course, another two is coming up with the more problems. But this is interesting because sometimes we don't know where to place our efforts. So, a little bit of tools for you guys to try to figure that out, right? And burnout, again, one of the things that can increase the level of satisfaction in your company, right, is bring more automation. There's plenty of new technology in the market, and then you really need to take this seriously, right? You need to go shop around and see the best solution for you, because that will liberates more time for your employees to be more meaningful in what they are doing, to become more analysts and not that just executing, steps.
Yeah. So a lot of times I get asked, what do I do in my job? And I break it down like this. I say 60% is one-on-one talking to a prospective buyer of Workday software. 30% is doing events like this, helping the finance world make decisions and drive them through marketing events. But 10%, I call it teaching an old dog new tricks. So I'm in the latter part of my career, okay? And I'm okay with that. But technology is moving so fast. I think training, learning, whether you're a new employee or an employee that's been working 30 plus years, such as myself, that's a critical part of keeping advancing, and it prevents burnout as well. I've got two young sons who are both CPAs, and they're teaching me something every day, Dad. But this brings me to one other question I saw on the chat, and it was about older employees being threatened possibly by artificial intelligence. And this is our CEO at Workday has actually said this a couple times publicly, but he's not a fan of the term artificial intelligence because it leads people to think that they're being replaced by machines. We prefer the term machine learning, which is tasks being learned repetitively over and over by a computer and driving our finance world to being a little more predictive than historical, like we've been all these years. So that's true whether it's predicting numbers or predicting employee risk, where they may be flight risk, but becoming predictive through using repetition through computers is definitely something that, whether you're in the Gen Z, millennial versus baby boomer categories, it's not threatening you. It's actually making opportunities in your area. So, any other old dogs out there wanting to learn new tricks, come see me.
Good.
And I would just add to the as we think about this subject of burnout and boosting morale, I think it's very important in this environment to expand and define the definition of what work responsibilities are. And what I mean by that is, as an employee, as a leader, as a team member, I have a responsibility to maintain my health and wellness. That is a factor, that is an input to the output of the business objectives. On a regular basis, I have to make sure that I'm getting the things like, if it's exercise that makes someone tick, if it's time with a certain amount of time with family that's needed in order to maintain a certain mindset and prevent the burnout. I think it's important that we communicate with our managers and that we structure our days and not necessarily, again, ask for it, but demand that time for the things that are important for us. Because if we don't get those and then the business objectives aren't met because employees are burned out, it's detrimental to the organization anyway. But if we communicate, if we actively engage in what John talked about, this communication loop of, hey, I'm really needing to get more of this in order to be able to produce the end result that you desire as a leader. I don't think there are many leaders that shy away from helping employees get what they need. So I think it really becomes the redefinition, right? Some people may aspire to have more time with family post-COVID because they've had some insights that have led them to want to restructure their lives. Some may feel, alternatively. So I think, again, we can't reinforce enough the importance of the communication and then the confidence to structure those days and those workloads in a way that allows us to sustain our output. Because at the end of the day, those businesses that will be standing at the end of the race are the ones that are able to sustain this level of performance and production. And burnout doesn't help anyone, doesn't help the organization, doesn't help the employee.
So look how interesting, right? 5 years ago, I was just starting my new position in the Bahamas, right? I was brought by my previous boss. And then when I got there, he said, well, man, I have a problem here because our closing time is, forget, we are closing the Bahamas, the resort in 20 business days. And this is, we should be closing in 3 business days. So, doing a little bit of assessment when you're a fresh person, you start to understand what is happening. And then again, it goes back to what I said before. The most valuable thing that you can offer to a person is your time, right? So I started to see, and everybody was working like crazy. They were leaving the hotel at every single day, 10, 11, 1 a.m., trying to get things done. It was, a crazy mess, right? We have almost 3,000 keys, 5,000 employees. It's a big operation. So, someone has to sacrifice, and then you need to understand that you need to have like a time limit, right? So I put myself to start to train every single person in that team to try to understand what were they lacking of. And little by little, that to start to tweak some processes, right, to get them in the right order. Sometimes it was simple as teach someone how to do pivot, and they were, all sort of ages, right? Sometimes it was just a talk because that person had a personal problem. Sometimes it was just moving people around just to make sure that they are more efficient in some places. My boss, he doesn't have any patience to deal with the associates. So that was me, right? For an entire year, working closely with the associates, right? So 1 year goes by, and now we have our 3 business day closing. He's happy, and everybody's leaving by 5:30. 5:30, everybody's out. They have their own life. And then this is, of course, it's just a small example of, there was so many details, but just a small example of how time is important. Your time dedicated to your people. That's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat. And there's one that I'll go ahead and take because it's one that is near and dear to me. But as one that's having a bit of burnout, how do you better manage yourself? And as someone that wants to do everything for everyone, I would recommend 2 things. One is setting very clear and realistic expectations. Most of the time, and not all of the time, but most of the time, we didn't set a very clear kind of, hey, I can't do this. And so that person doesn't know that they're overburdening us because we keep taking it. And so one is, I would say, be very open and communicative and make sure that you do set very, very good lines. And then the second would be to delegate. As someone that also likes to do things, and we like to be in control because then we can manage it and make sure everything is ticks and ties and everything. But that's what does lead to burnout, is taking on too much and not delegating. So I don't know if you three have anything to add to that, but those would be my two recommendations.
The
on
third
that.
thing is ask for help. Don't be,
Yeah.
take the pride out, right? Ask for help.
Yeah.
We are not gods. We need help as well, right? Ask for
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this because I used to work for Lifetime Fitness, but I'm a huge advocate of mental health and physical health supplementing everything else. And I left my home in Colorado yesterday, and the front page article was about winter depression because the days are shorter and it's colder. And the number one thing they said to do was go outside for 15 minutes or take a short walk, clear your head, get away from your work. And people say, I don't have time for that. Yes, you do. Because honestly, if you don't make time for that, then everything we're talking about today is irrelevant. So you have to have be mentally, and you don't have to go swim 3,000 yards. Just take a 15-minute walk outside. It truly makes a difference. So there's
Remember,
my
guys,
plug for the health side.
the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
Fix those 20% and you're gonna be good.
Yeah, and I think that the thing I would add, just as a personal story, I went through a period in my career where most of what I did early in my career was focus on fitness, and that was for a period of time that was my job. And then I transitioned into a traditional corporate workspace, and I started to deprioritize that, and I started to allow other things to creep in and take control of that time. And I would say, "Oh, I'm fine. I've always been a healthy, fit guy," but it started to impact me, and it started to impact my performance, right? And I think one of the things that I found throughout COVID is, like John said, I had to refocus on health and wellness and understanding the importance of even a short amount of time. And because when that's not present, there's a risk that all the other things fall apart.
Okay. Let me see if we have, so I don't know if you guys, we have 3 more minutes if we want to kind of add our final comments, but I think overall a ton of great value here, guys. We got to think outside of the box. We got to go a little bit non-traditional, but at the end of the day, our number one risk and our number one priority is our employees, because I think it's that 20%, right? It can go really well or it can go really bad if they leave. So, the more emphasis and importance that you can put on that and listening to your employees or potential employees, the better off you'll be.
Yep, I would just say, creating a positive employee experience. I mentioned that culture earlier. Valkir mentioned it about listening and actually talking sometimes. Be an intelligent listener. And the last thing I'm going to say is leverage technology, but don't let it, it complements the human experience. It's not replacing it. So technology plus the human experience, I think, creates a great environment.
The 80-20 rule, guys, find that 20% and fix it, right? And use the most valuable thing that you have in your life for your employees, your time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would just say, lastly, is reemphasizing the importance of human connection. And I think John, both of you kind of alluded to it, is talk to our managers, talk to our leaders, let them know what we need, and vice versa. As the employee, don't be willing to ask your manager or leader what they need. How can I help you? It's the common courtesy. A lot of times I'll say the kindergarten rule, right? What do you need today, leader? How can I help you? Because we're in this together, and it reinforces the emphasis of some, small things, that the idea of team is mutual benefit. Everyone works together to achieve the objective. And we have to communicate. We have to ask for help, ask for time if you need it, because everybody wins in the end.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. John, Derek, thank you all. I think this was a great session, very informative, so I appreciate your time. And Michael, we'll kick it back to you.
Thank you, Stacy, Valkir, John, Derek, for such an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's discussions, will be on demand following the event. Now, this officially concludes the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum, Priorities, Predictions, and Concerns. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. We want to thank our sponsors, UiPath, Appson, HighRadius, Workday, and Bill. Thank you and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.